we're going to have guests. The main thing is, starting with League Express, in defence of the BBC on 4020, by 4020 magazine, nick this from your news agents. Michael Brown of Stoke.
We cannot condemn that form of behaviour.
Don't do that. Michael Brown, not the former Sheffield United midfielder, I assume, of Stokesley in North Yorkshire. You know, when they repeat the big match replayed on ITV, Brian Moore reads out everyone's address in full, including children. It's like, when did they stop doing that on TV?
GDPR.
Yeah, in defence of the BBC, it says here. And there's a long letter. I'm assuming last week someone slagged off the BBC, but this week, and he says North's rubbish. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? Nationally, the Super League show, although heavily derided, does exactly what it says on the tin. Just Super League. But, to my mind, says Michael, the broadcaster has always been a champion of rugby league, apart from John Inverdale. He doesn't put that, I put that in.
Or Richard Bacon.
Richard Bacon. I quite like John Inverdale, which goes against my rugby league principles, but there you go. And has drawn attention to its inclusive and community-based qualities by documenting the efforts of Kevin Seinfeld, the
famous
American comedian. Yeah, I used to love his program. They used to put Seinfeld on a worse slot than the Super League show. Imagine that. So well done to Kevin Seinfeld there. Gets a mention in the League Express this week. We're here at Headingley. Why are we here at Headingley for?
It's props night. They have got 4 props from across the eras who are going to tell us their experiences and humorous anecdotes as props are wont to do. You've got Steve Pitchford, the Bionic Barrel, for those who remember.
That's a great nickname.
Yeah.
That is a great nickname.
Lance Todd Trophy winner at the 1977 Challenge Cup final. Try scorer in the World Cup final that same year. Then they've got Barrie McDermott, who fan of the show.
I've heard of him. Yeah. He was on it once.
Sky pundit, but obviously had a great rivalry with Stuart Fielden, which is never failed to be mentioned. No. Jamie Peacock, who had a similar rivalry with Willie Mason.
Had a good book out as well, you understand.
Never failed to be. I couldn't possibly comment on that. And somebody called Danika Priim. Never heard of it. Who obviously, it's great that they're including now women in the mix of great props. So it should be a good night. Expecting over 150 people. Pie and peas. JJB is the host.
Wow.
So we thought we'd gate crash.
He must have played prop at some point.
Oh, he will.
He played everywhere.
Yeah,
pretty much.
He will have done.
He's the.
But his introduction could take the first hour and a half, I suspect.
That's true.
But should be a good night, and hopefully they'll come on and tell us about it either before or after.
We don't really want to talk about Leeds' performance at Hull KR, do we?
Well, it won't take very long.
Jordan Abdal's quite good at kicking.
Well, I don't know what the picture showed on the telly for those who were watching it, but whatever it was 10 times worse in real life. The rain was absolutely cascading. There was a wind that was whipping it up, and in the first half, when Hull KR had the elements, Abdal was in his absolute prime. He was superb, and yes, there was a lot of criticism. Some of it founded on young Luke Hooley in his debut at fullback and Daryl Alfords, but watching the ball swirl around in those conditions, it was virtually impossible to predict where it was going to land. 14-0 at half-time was probably still salvageable, but the Leeds conceded a try straight after the break, which summed up everything that was wrong for them during the night and emphasised how good Abdal's kicking was. And I think also there were a couple of forwards who were absolutely superb for Hull KR. And you look at the meters, and Jesse Sue was one of them. But full credit to Hull KR. You play the conditions, and whilst Leeds would prefer to presumably be on a night like tonight at Headingley that's bathed in sunlight and looking lush and green, you don't always get that at this time of year, and you've got to be adaptable. Leeds weren't, and Hull KR were, and thoroughly deserved to win. So not a great or edifying spectacle. It came down to 5 drives and the kicker who was going to make a mistake, and Leeds made more than Hull KR did.
I didn't realise until at the end of the game that Mallorca were playing football on Via Sport plus the 3 channel. I could have watched that instead, but I watched Leeds in the rain, but never mind. So Hull KR going to the derby, obviously on the back of the win this week, but as we know, it is rivals round. Is it rivals round or rivalry round?
Rivals, but which some of it, yes, you get. You know, the whole derby, Wigan Saints.
Wakefield's a city, by the way, for people making videos.
Cass and Wakefield, yeah, there's a logical derby. Not all of them are. You know, Catalan Warrington's turned out really well for the broadcaster because you've got the teams that are 1 and 2 in the league, so there is genuine rivalry about the way they're playing this season. Not sure Leeds and Huddersfield have had a rivalry since, I think, the Championship final of 1914. But there you go.
Huddersfield won that one, I assume.
Yes, they were brilliant in that. The team of all talents.
Ken Bates might have been there. Ken Bates wasn't there. He might have been. Hull KR going into the derby, and of course, as we know, because it's a cliche, and if anyone says this on TV, they should be fried with electrical wires on their testicles unless they're female. And then I don't know where you'd put them.
You're not doing Rugby League bingo, are you? Commentators bingo.
The form book, I mean, with an extra window here, I could throw it out there, but I haven't got one, so...
Because there isn't one.
No, and Hull aren't going to be, because Warrington put them through the washing machine. The Hoover washing machine that Sean Briscoe was telling us was brought to us by Hoover at half-time, as he mentioned Hoover about every 3 seconds with Helen Skelton.
Well, he must have known he was on Channel 4 and was able to do so.
Hoover. Warrington 34, Hull 6. It was a very entertaining first half. And what it made me think
it was if you're a Warrington fan.
Well,
not so much Hull.
Well, Hull are rubbish these days, so, I expected it. But pound for pound, Hull FC must be the worst value for money in the Super League. Because as we know, Wakefield don't spend the salary cap and they haven't won a game yet and they can't score. But Hull, having pushed Saints the other way, well, there's no point in pushing Saints if you're going to... I'm taking everything away from Warrington here now, mate. It's very unfair.
I think
Warrington were very good.
Warrington were exceptionally good in the first half. I think that slight lack of ruthlessness that they showed in the second half is something... That's the next stage that Darryl Powell needs to get them to. That it's all very well being dominant at the moment, but you have to kick on. We saw when Salford played Hull that they took it to 60, they never gave in. So there would be some concerns for Darryl that they didn't keep that going and replicate it. But I do think that Hull are clutching a little bit at straws to say because the second half was 6-6 that they can get something out of it. I'm not sure. I just think it. Everybody said it beforehand, and it clearly was a case in point that what Hull are this year is what Warrington were last year, and that was emphasised in that first half. And Tony Smith knows the job that he walked into. He knows that it's a dressing room full of people, most of whom aren't going to be there. He can look at what Darryl Powell has done and the side he has now got and recruited and the style he wants to play, and hope that he's given the time and the space and the patience to do that. I'm not sure it was sold to the whole fans that this will be a year where, yet again, you're going to have to put up with substandard performances to get eventually to where you want to be, because I think they've heard that for the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, this is the mystery, isn't it? Is you can blame a coach, but you can't blame a string of coaches, all of whom are different in style. Yes, the recruitment is very... I don't want to say one-dimensional, but they seem to go for a certain style of forward, we know that. But something's wrong at Hull, and continues to be wrong at Hull, and has been wrong at Hull for a long time. So what that is, do I blame the owner? I don't know. Chief executive?
I think, again, just collecting a group of players who individually are good and fill a brief, but you're not building or putting together a team and a culture and an identity is probably what Hull are guilty of, and certainly Warrington in the past have been guilty of that. It might get you, at certain points, a cup, but it doesn't build that longevity. There's no buy-in because the turnover is either too quick, or the players who tend to stay for too long probably aren't quite at the level that you need them to be at to sustain success. So I think they're in that hinterland at the moment, unfortunately.
Paul says the first time he's watched Warrington this season, he was impressed. I'm slightly concerned that what if it is their year? What happens? What do we do next year? Who do we get on to? I mean, I'd like to be Castleford because they never won the league, the championship. But even that makes no sense because they have won the championship. You know what I mean? They haven't been the champions of England straight away.
I mean, we're a quarter of the way through the season, so you can start to make some general judgments, and it's clear that unless Warrington alarmingly fall off the standard that they've set, or they get key injuries over a long term in spine positions, then they are going to be there or thereabouts. It's then the mentality of when they get into a game where everything's riding on it, and there is no, well, we can put it right next week. Do they have the characters? Be interested. Josh Maguire he should make his debut in Catalan this week after his 7-week ban. Again, he's not a bad bloke to come into a team that's already winning. So it's just how you manage that. And I think they have got some good young players who are maturing. So Matty Ashton, Josh Thewlis, Matty Nicholson. They've played really well, I think. So yeah, you got to have a core of young people you can build a team around and some stars behind them. I think Stefan Ratchford looked comfortable. We've said on this programme before, Josh Drinkwater I think is the guy who hasn't had enough mentions, but actually has been able to be that bridge between dominant forwards and George Williams doing what he wants. So yeah, it is impressive. All it means at the moment is they're in a position to win something rather than other clubs at the bottom who probably in a position not to win anything.
I didn't like the look of Nicholson. I think it's the first time I've seen him play. He's a very, not if raw's the right word, but you can tell there's something about him. I mean, I said it on the commentary, Kyle Amo said it in commentary, there's something about him, he's going to be a future star, but not that I want to compare him to a Paul Sculthorpe or whatever, because it's far too big a...
I think you can see why Wigan were upset when he left, because clearly they'd recognised that he was a potentially great player of the future, and indeed I suspect that Warrington will benefit from that.
So it could be Warrington's year. And now, Tim and Mark having a go at us here. This is not good. Tim says, looks like you've arrived early for the bingo in the cabaret suite of a cruise ship. This is the premier...
It's the Howard suite.
Premier suite of the Premier Rugby League ground in the country. I mean, we've just been watching cricket. Yorkshire cricket are playing against some uni students.
Oh, it's finished.
Yeah, they never played Barnsley College when I was there. I could have got a get here.
It's finished. I think it was a draw.
Mark says we would have got thrown out for dressing like bin men. This is one of my best shirts.
Matches?
It's not black tie, is it?
No,
one's told.
It's pine peas. It's prop forwards. It's hardly likely to be dress suits.
I'm leaning forward to read the comments because the sun's running out, even though I've got it on my phone. Big test for Saints on Friday, says Paul. They really need to click now. The concern is growing among the fan base. I know Kev, who's very... I mean, he was negative when they won 4 in a row, and they could still win 5 in a row. He's always upset about something at Saints. But they beat Wakefield 38-0. I've not seen the highlights because I don't need to.
I think
Wakefield Trinity nil. It's our new name. It's like Stenhouse
nil would be concerning. 4 out of 7. Was it? They've only scored 43 points so far this year, which 6 a game. It's clearly an Achilles heel, and then when they go behind, knowing that they're not going to be able to score points, it runs away from them. The derby will be interesting because there's 2 key players out. We now know one from either side. So Alex Worms is out for a month. Jai Field, anything up to 10 weeks. So who do you think is more inconvenienced by a star player? Probably does affect Wigan a little bit more, particularly as Cade Cust is now out indefinitely with his neck injury, and they'd moved Jai Field to obviously up into 6 to cover for that. So that is a blow for Wigan, I think, and will affect the way they want to play. Certainly at Lee, Field and French were brilliant. I suspect that 22,000 tickets already sold. It'll be close on the start. What we do know is it'll be an absolutely wonderful atmosphere, and it will be down to temperament that who copes with that best.
Kevin, you're not late. We were just early. Don't panic.
We didn't want to waste the opportunity.
No. Up the wire. Next 3 games will judge whether to get excited or not.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, 3 big games, and again, if you don't win them all, you still.
No, and I think we said it last week, and Steve McNamara was honest enough about it this week, that it's when you suffer your first defeat, how do you respond to that? McNamara said that he detested the way his team had played, but he couldn't fault the fact that they'd shown enough to come back and beat Castleford. And if Warrington do lose either at Catalan or against Saints and Wigan, what they're going to do the following week? How will that affect them? Confidence is it's a strange beast in sport, and you can be top of the world 1 minute and then questioning what you're doing and why you're doing the other. So
he's wearing a suit.
He looks very smart.
He does, doesn't he? You can't see him, but he's going to appear there.
There he is, Mr. Jones Buchanan.
And of course, it's good now because it's Easter and there's not 2 games. So,
which is
we can't blame
fantastic.
that.
I think that is fantastic. I think that's going to not only improve the product over Easter and the rolling excitement, the narrative that JJB likes to talk about all the time, that we're going to have a game. We're going to have 6 games over the 4 days, which is great. You can then roll them into each other. But the standard is going to be better because there isn't a second game on the Monday, and the standard the week after that is going to be better because that's the one that is almost unwatchable.
Yeah, everyone plays pretty much on Good Friday apart from Castleford Wakefield on Thursday. That includes the Championship and League One as well. 2 games on Saturday in the Super League: Catalans Warrington and Leeds Salford, plus Cornwall Doncaster. So Doncaster get a nice weekend out in Cornwall.
If you're going to have to go to Cornwall, go on a bank holiday weekend.
Sunday, Leeds here against Huddersfield and Leeds Women versus York. And
which I think has had great coverage as well. Looking forward to the start of the Women's Super League season. Brilliant that they clearly have got to repeat the grand final as the opening game.
We've got a guest for you tomorrow, fingers crossed, so there'll be an extra podcast later this week. So I think it's an exclusive, possibly an exclusive, but it's a good job we didn't speak to Jodie Cunningham last week. Not that we didn't want to speak to Jodie Cunningham, but it's just dumb luck. So Saints won, Wakefield lost. We're going to put 50 past Cass on Thursday. You can record this and prove it to me right.
But again, the phone book is going to go out the window.
It is. We're going to go burn it. We don't read books.
Are you buying into the idea that it's virtually £1 million game a quarter of the way into the season, which I think is how it's going to be built up this week?
No, because I just looked at the league table and apparently Castle have lost 65 of their 7 games this season. So
that's a good percentage.
It is. So if we go on percentages, no. I can't get annoyed and concerned by Wakefield's form, knowing that this is probably at the start of the season. This is what it appeared that might happen anyway. So
Wakefield have picked up 3 loan players from Huddersfield, which at least is going to give them a little bit of more depth. But I think what they won't have factored in, as indeed Castleford won't have done, is the form of Lee, which even though Wigan beat them relatively convincingly this week, 3 wins out of 7 games is still a better return than most had thought. And they've got an experienced group of players that are not going to get phased if they have a run of 4 or 5 games where they don't pick up a win. I think the worry for the loser of Wakefield and Castleford is that everybody will then say there's crisis. Clearly Cass have got to overcome going to Perpignan on Saturday night to play again on the Thursday, which I think again is a really tough ask.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be the Thursday game, does it? I know Salford played on Sunday, so they...
But it's the travel back, and it does seem to be a really tough ask for Castleford, I think.
Mark, there's going to be somebody sat there in a bit. That's why there's only half. That's why there's space. When you say just a camera, it's my laptop. It's not some professional organisation.
We've got a microphone.
I know. You can't see it, but that's my actual. I use that for work. It's cheap. Salford lost to Huddersfield 26-16. Good result for the Giants. I was thinking of Ian Watson 2 years ago at Huddersfield, where they had the awful season, then rebuilt. Was it last season? I can't remember. I'm lost.
Yep.
And Darryl Powell last year. If they'd been managers of Chelsea, they'd been out on the radio long ago.
Well, again, Huddersfield is a very good example of why there shouldn't be too much panic at the moment at Hull, because they've got Warrington as a template, and they've got Huddersfield as a template. When a coach comes in and wants to play a certain way, then he has to have the players that he knows can play that way. Normally, when they arrive, they already get who's been recruited because they're taking over from someone who's built up a team that they wanted to play a different way. So, the way Tony Smith wants to play isn't the way Brett Hodgson wanted to play. The players that have been signed would have been in the mould of the Brett Hodgson way. So there will be some weeding out, there will be some moving on, and we need some players who can move the ball, not big forwards that just trundle it up all day.
And the bad news for Huddersfield, of course, coming out of that win is Ashton Golding, who's been in good form, and Will Price, both injured, going into Sunday's game at big rivals.
Yeah,
Leeds.
Golding's definitely out again. They've said 6 to 8 weeks. Price did leave on crutches, but they don't know the extent of his ankle injury just at the moment.
I hope that means Ashton Gordon's on the telly a bit more, because he's good on the telly.
He is good. We do like him.
Yeah.
I do find that, the current player adds a whole new dimension to...
There's no characters in rugby league anymore.
Really?
There's no characters in
Who says?
The internet people. There's no characters anywhere. Okay. Eddie Hearn probably said it as well, but...
I think that's a... yes, Mr. Hearn and his dalliances with Conor Benn at the moment, he may well be hitting out at other sports, but there are one or two things in his own house that possibly needs to be put in order as well.
I think
if he's watching, we'd still like him involved in the sport. We've
put our eggs in a basket that I think will work out okay. We'll find out sooner rather than later anyway. I brought them on.
First guest.
Pleased to meet you, sir.
Do join us.
Do you mind if I stand up?
Of course not, as long as you're on camera.
If I get sat down...
You may never... We might need to winch you out of the seat.
The knees will stiffen up and that'll be me then.
This is Richard.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve Pitchford. The Bionic Barrel.
If you
don't mind me calling you that.
That's what they used to call me, mate.
One of the great nicknames of rugby league.
I should warn you we're live, just in case you...
Does that mean I can't swear?
Oh, you can swear if you want.
We don't care. We don't care.
It asked me for Calvin already.
I am fascinated by a game you played in that I know very little about, because I don't think we got the level of information then that we would have got now.
What's that?
The 1977 World Cup final at the Sydney Cricket Ground.
I remember it well.
Which you scored a try in.
Yes.
And England lost, Great Britain lost by a point.
They lost by a point, yeah.
13-12 against a great Australian team.
If George Fairbairn kicks the goal, we win by a point. And he missed. So we lose by a point.
But tell us about that game, because clearly Arthur Beetson was playing against you. It was a great Australian team.
I got his last international jersey. I swapped his jersey, and it was his last international jersey, Arthur Beetson, which was a catch. But that, we had a good team out. It was as good as we could have put out. I can't remember his name was from Huddersfield.
Billy Thompson.
Yeah. And Stuart Wright intercepted a ball. Nobody in front of him. He could not have failed but scored in the sticks. And Billy threw his whistle for obstruction.
Did Billy forget that we were in Australia?
But it wasn't him that obstructed. It was an Australian who obstructed. It wasn't his fault. And he says, as soon as the bloke whistled, he said, I could have swallowed it. Yeah.
But you peak then, would you say, that 1977 season?
I had a really, really good season. I got voted Player of the Season from here, 77. I got the Lance Todd Trophy in 77. And I went to Australia and I was voted Player of the tournament. So I had a really, really good season.
And what was it like playing at the Sydney Cricket Ground in a World Cup final? Because there's not too many people that would have experienced what you did.
It's an old adage thing, isn't it? It's like the game starts, you concentrate, you don't bother about what's around you. I never did. I never bothered what was around me. I did once. We were playing a team up country, and we were red hot, and I was gagging, and I went to the bloke drinking. I said, hey, get a drink of that kid. Yeah, so...
And that 77 final against Widnes, who were the Cup Kings at the time, had in their pack the likes of Jim Mills, Bill Ramsey, who played so well up here. You'd have played with Bill.
Yeah, I did.
So you knew what he could do. Dougie Lawton, Mick Adams. But you monstered him that day.
Well.
Yeah, but you were fantastic that day. You never won a game single-handedly, but that was about as close as you could get.
We were a good, steady team. We had a great balance, right? From number 1 to number 13. We had a great balance aside. We had the speed, we had the go down the middle tough players who could do that. I always remember Graham Eccles. Right. I always say to him, he must have known every blade of grass. He never stopped. He just ran and ran.
And yet
tackled everything that
he
moved
wasn't the
and tackled-
biggest.
Yeah,
He
no.
wasn't the biggest player, and he never got international honours.
And he didn't even get Yorkshire honours because he was up against such as like Phil Lowe. Big ragey second row that played for Hull. I went on tour with us, I can't remember his name. This is what you get when you get...
It's all right.
You get like...
It's all right. I'm with you.
We'll go down there and I'll sit with family and I'll just shout out, "It was!" Because it'll come back to me then.
I'll wake up at 3 in the morning,
Yeah,
start
yeah.
ringing people, saying I've
No,
remembered.
it shows me about 20 minutes as I can think of it.
So in terms of your career, you came in as a very young player into an established team, because that team of the late 60s at Leeds was a great side.
I'm trying to think of it were like Beverly's normal fullback. There were John Ackey and Alan Smith.
John Holmes
There were
running the show.
no, it wasn't John Holmes. The stabbed off were Mick Schubert,
Yeah,
Seaborn,
right.
and the centres were
Sid
Sid
Hines.
Hines and Bernard Watson. Yeah, they were 3 quarters, and pack were Mick Clark,
Tony Crosby,
Tony Crosby,
Kenny
Ayres, Albert Ayre, Bill Ramsey, and Ray Batten.
So as a young kid coming into that environment with the likes of David Ward and Roy Dickinson,
Yeah.
that must have been a perfect apprenticeship for you.
Well, there were a few years before them two showed up.
You paved the way.
You see, what happened was that we had the Black Pearl, who was coach, Guy Francis, right? And his idea of coaching was, if you're good enough to play for Leeds, it's like I got my chance because Kenny A got injured. So I was number 10 for second team, you went into first team. And if you weren't good enough, what are you doing here? That was...
So he wasn't teaching you how to play.
No.
The expectation was you already could play.
Yeah, I would, you know. But as it went through, there were such as Graham Eccles, John Holmes, Phil, you went in second team, Les Dill. They more or less, Graham Eccles, they more or less went in and fitted in. Whereas I had to play for my players. I had to, because anybody can put your head down and run, can't they? That's not hard work, putting your head down and running. But yeah, I got my chance, and I did all right. The first thing that Roy Francis said to me, you know, he says, "What do you think you're doing?" But it were pre-season training. He said, what are you doing? I said, "I'm going up." He says, "You'll never make a rugby player, you." I said, "What? Oh, right, thanks." And then he went to Australia. So I got my chance, and when he come back, I was already in the squad then. So
you got your chance under Derek Turner?
no, he didn't like me either.
Did he not like you either?
No,
You weren't hard enough to play for.
I wasn't dirty enough to play for Derek Taylor.
Because you wanted to play rugby, you didn't want to necessarily take your opposite number out.
No, I wasn't bothered about trying to knock people out. I wanted to play the rugby. But Derek signed a lot of players. He signed some players on that were good footballers, don't get me wrong, right, that could play football. But he always had in his pack the assassins.
Tony Fisher.
Yeah, well, he got Tony Fisher, he got the kid from Featherstone. Number 8, goal kicker.
Terry
Clausen.
I thought you meant Gary Hetherington.
No, he likes to knock a few out.
In terms of your extended run then, did that come under initially Eric Ashton, because he was here for a year? Or was it after
Ashton
Eric
didn't
had
like
gone?
me.
Eric didn't like you. Did anybody like you?
Sid Hines likes him. I played, one season I played about 17 or 18 games straight off. And then it was like, no, you're not my material, off you go. And the thought keeping me sweet would be, but it won't. I won't bother. I wanted to play for Leeds, I wanted to be out there.
So you were happy to play in the A team if you weren't playing in the first
Yeah,
team
I
and
was
wait
quite-
for the next
I was
opportunity?
quite happy.
So you'd have hated dual registration or going out on loan?
The chances would come, and I know that. But like the conversation, like I say, our pack, we had Mick Addison, David Ward and myself in front row, which were the power, right? The stoppers. You know, we blocked middle at Park. Then we had the fabulous Graham Eccles. Phil Cookson. And then when we went to Wembley, we had Stan Fernley and David. No, Mick
Stan Fernley and then Mick Crane.
Yeah,
the
Mick
following
Crane, yeah. And we had the power, the guile, John Holmes, of course, right? Kevin Dick. He was a player of his own making. He did a lot of good things. It was like another forward with Kevin. It could stop anything. You know, if you run at him like you could get tackled. That was simple. You know, like you say, run at Littlands. Nah, not Kevin.
So you mentioned Mick Harrison there, arguably one of the toughest players, certainly I've ever seen.
Yes.
But came to training in a Mini. How the hell did he get in it?
I don't know. I didn't know he had a mini car. I didn't know we got it, to be quite honest.
Half an hour apparently to get out the car before you did any training.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that with Mick. But yeah,
Was he as tough as we thought he was? Didn't take any liberties with Mick. And what's he like to play alongside somebody like
the
that?
thing was, nobody took liberties.
No.
He didn't allow it. He didn't want it. He didn't allow it. So that if you wanted to go out there and play rugby, he was your man. But if you went out there and rough it up, he was your man. Great player. Great for us. Hey, how you doing?
All right, old lad.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, fine.
How are you?
You all
All
right?
right. Hiya.
You're now live.
Oh, that's good.
Just don't swear.
No, have I just jumped?
It's nice
Have I
to
just
look at
interrupted?
No, it's all right. It's fine. We're very laissez-faire around here.
Yeah.
Do we just talk about Mick Harrison?
Oh, yeah.
You'd remember
Very.
one of the toughest prop forwards that ever played the game.
But it was good for him.
It would have
It was
been.
good for David
Yeah.
Rod.
Absolutely.
I was very fortunate not to have to scrummage again.
But he was you could hang yourself on him. You know what I mean? He was
No.
big, strong, powerful
Nobody
man.
wanted to mess with him, did
That's
they?
what I've just said, exactly the same message. Nobody took liberties with Mick.
Which, if you're playing alongside him, is fantastic.
Yeah, but there's that.
No, because-
they wouldn't take liberties with Mick.
They took liberties with him.
What do you think all this is about?
They wouldn't take liberties with 9. Then.
Yeah, but Sid would have sorted about anyway.
All right. Bav? All right.
Basket.
All right. Danika? Please
Hello, how you doing?
How are you?
Thank
All
you
right.
for joining us.
Oh, is that it? I was done.
Well, we're just very grateful to have had you.
No, listen. Just send the cheque to...
You'll be the first. If you get a cheque, you'll be the first.
Thank you very much.
Shall we go at the same time, or how we doing, gents?
Go on.
You all right?
Oh, how are you?
Good. Always good. Always great.
Kim,
Does it mess your...
No.
No, I'm
dictating your podcast
I'm saying you can come on with us.
all together.
Look at that, everyone's here.
How are we?
We're good. We're
Looking
all the
forward
better.
to a good night.
Oh, there'll be some stories tonight.
Yeah, I love
won't
it. I love it. And a sign of that era. So he's seen him. I've not seen him for a while. He's like, what does anybody want to listen to me for?
Well, he's just told us what,
Yeah.
quarter of an hour of gold.
Yeah.
No
They're brilliant,
coaches,
aren't
no coaches liked him. That's...
No, and as well, I think that era, it was a pure... They were part-time, but it was, I play rugby, I love what I do, and then at the weekend, I enjoy myself.
Well, the other thing he just said that was really interesting is they only ever wanted to play for this club.
Yeah.
So there was dual registration wouldn't have worked, going out on loan wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
He was happy to sit in the A team for
Yeah.
however long it
Yeah.
took for the coach to bring him back.
Yeah.
And we've sort of lost a little bit of that.
Absolutely, because it's a business, isn't it? And it amazes me, and we're here on behalf of the Players Association. I love it, I value and hold it in really high regard and esteem the role that I play within that, and I love it. But what I'm always envious is when you see the lads from the 70s and the 80s, and there's a table of 15 of them. They've all grown up, they've played amateur together, they've played schools rugby together, whether they're from that side or this side, they know each other intimately, and it's
Have
a
you in 10
good
years?
era. What?
Sat on a table
sat
70
round
years
well,
old.
it'd be me on Sunday afternoon.
Exactly.
I mean, on
So
Sunday,
therefore
because
that'll
Willie
be you.
P's leaving.
Yes,
So
there's a bit to do for him.
there's a table of his era there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a
Gonna
few
miss him.
shandies. He's given great service, Willie, and
Well, you'll know from being a Wakefield fan.
I mean, I have the utmost respect and always will for the fact that he obviously wasn't paid what he was told when he played in 2000 and still stayed in 2001.
yeah.
So, as much as obviously I don't enjoy Leeds winning anything, you know, there may be a little
You
tear
started to enjoy Leeds winning stuff.
We've been through this, it's not the men. But when he won the grand final with Leeds, you know, it's a little...
Yeah, and there's always a bit of that as well, isn't there?
Because he was, you know, another
It's
servant,
reflective
the word
pride, isn't
servant's
it?
a strange one, isn't it? But he probably was at Wakefield getting paid to, well, wasn't getting paid to do a lot of work, so he'll always be there.
I first met Willie when he was about 17, I was 18. I played over in New Zealand with Barla, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and we shared the field, we did what we did, parted ways, never expecting to see each other ever again, because rugby league's like that. He came over on a tour, I think it was with Auckland, spent some time with a guy called Solomona. David Solomona's uncle, he was called Tiny, his nickname was Tiny, because he was the smallest of them all.
But he was still huge.
But he was still 6'4" and 115 kilograms. But I played with Tiny at Oldham. Willie was staying at his house, and Willie said to me at training one night with Oldham, I've got this kid over from Auckland, he wants to see you, he reckons he knows you. And I'm blasé thinking, who do I know from Auckland? And met up with Willie again. He signed for Hunslet, signed for Wakefield, did a bit of stuff at Wakefield, and then when he learned his trade and when he was good enough, he came to the Rhinos.
When he was good enough.
Yeah.
Talking of Oldham, massive change.
Yeah, he's done the unthinkable, Mike Ford. He's managed to get hold of the club, and I think there's a lot of goodwill around Mike now, and I don't want to rubbish and disrespect anybody else's contribution, but it needed it, and it needed new energy, it needed new people, new voices.
Move back to Boundary Park.
That is important because it's an OL postcode, and although Staley Bridge is only a couple of miles down the road from me, it still didn't quite feel like it should have done. So yeah, I'm pleased for Fordy, and a lot of Oldhamers will get back involved. He actually rang me a couple of days before, and I went, Jesus, you must be struggling if you're asking me to get my boots back on, as in help out with the squad. But
I think you meant play them.
no, God forbid, no. I'm 50 years old. I'm 51 in a bit, Danika. No.
Never say never.
My shoulders are made of biscuits. We've had this
I
conversation,
don't pretend
haven't
to
we?
be soft now.
Not to play, but just to have an influence on the players and what have you, and maybe do a little bit of coaching. I haven't said no, but I've said not yet. So yeah, I think it's just good. It's just got a real good feel, and they had me, you know, when they said that he'd signed on, ready to play
Really?
on April the 1st.
Really?
Yeah.
On the phone?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I was like, what's he doing? What's he playing at? Maybe 51 ain't too old. That's what I was thinking.
No.
Yeah.
It's like having Richard and Jude, you know, but the Richard's likeable. Danika, it's a night where we're celebrating the great number 10s of Leeds. You wore 8, so was Daniel Anderson busy?
No, well, I started out at 8 and 10 actually, and then I played 10 for England.
You could have told me that.
So,
Well, I wanted
he's
you
get
to
factually
get to
fit
try.
right. We didn't actually get given numbers. We didn't get given numbers until the second year. So 2018, I played like 3 numbers actually. So, but yeah, so I'm up there. Thank you very much. But thank you for doing your research anyway, Richard. That's what I'm here for.
You know, I don't do any research. I've never
Yeah,
done
it
any
wasn't
research.
until halfway through like the second season really that they allocated numbers and stuff. So yeah, but to be here is a little bit crazy. It's that crazy roller coaster ride I'm on, isn't it? I stand here and I'm like looking around at the company, and it's still hard to believe that I'm like alongside it sometimes. So I'm just going to take every moment and enjoy it.
How important is it for the women's game, though, that you are? Because it kicks off this weekend, and somebody has made a conscious decision to say, we need to have you on the panel, which is quite a compliment to the women's game as much as
it's
you can.
wicked as well, and I think, you know, I like to think that I've done a little bit for the women's game when I was playing, and now maybe for the women coming up in the media and stuff, and kind of just letting them know that there's an alternative route after. People generally think, oh, I should go into coaching or I just retire, but now I'm like, I'd never touch coaching. I
You
don't
don't
think...
tell them that because then they'll be after your job. Don't say that.
I've already figured out who they are anyway, so it's fine. It's one of those things, isn't it? Like, it's wicked to be involved. It's showing the importance of the women's game, putting the women on the same pedestal. Women have got a long way to come still, but if you keep tapping away and making it... It's about making it a product, isn't it? Rugby league's a product. And make the women part of that product, and then that's only going to grow. So, if I'm going to be the trailblazer for the women in this side of it, then let's go.
We were just talking about the Easter period and how it's different this year because it's only the one game. Sky is showing all 6, when 7 if you include the women's game, plus 3 NRL games from Thursday to Sunday. For a commentator, is it easier as a narrative to roll out of one game and into the next one rather than thinking, I've got to get a whole round in on the Thursday, Friday, and got to get another whole round in on Monday?
Because there's more than just Eddie and Steve all now, we've got sort of 2 or 3 responsibilities each. So it's enough of a bite-size exposure. The truth is, I hate missing any game. I hate it. I hated it as a player. I hate it now. Last week, or a week before, I can't remember, I watched Thursday with a pizza, sat at home with my son and my son-in-law, and we watched it on TV. Friday I was at the game, and then Saturday it was the Catalan weekend. I was in the posh seats in the director's box with a mate of mine, and I watched it in that way. But I hated it. I don't like missing any. So I see that skill as like playing. It's muscle memory, and the more you do, the better. Do you feel that, Danika?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like doing the punditry stuff's easy because you're just doing the analysis, but the commentating. And because I've been out of the loop with commentating, I only did it a few weeks ago. And once I'm out of the loop, I think it's much harder to get back into the flow of it. But once you've done a few, then yeah, as long as you know what you're talking about. I think it's always helpful to have a bit of research, isn't it? Or at least know the players, know the people, know a little bit about where the club's history is in terms of their stats and their playing figures. But generally, you say what you see, and you build a narrative based on the fact that you've seen what they've done the week before, or who they've got leading to. Like it's massive for Warrington, isn't it? They've had a really good spell of 7 in 7 games, but the next 3 games are actually the more important ones. Catalan away, St Helens, Wigan. So that will be the exciting ones to cover because you've got a nice build-up of where they've been, but really you're going to test them over the next 3 weekends.
And I think traditionally as well, we get past Easter and we know what the runners and riders are, don't we? You can look at everybody who's gone through the squads. They've used those second and third in line players, so you know what quality they've got behind the 1 to 17. So I am reluctant to say it, but I think Warrington are. They've got to win the league. You can't. It's harder to make
too soon. You've spoken too soon.
Well, before a ball is kicked is too soon, which is what I've done for the last 3 years.
Put 5 on it, they won't win it.
Right, they'll win the league.
Gamble responsible.
They'll win the league. They will win the League Leaders Shield.
They will not.
Okay, that's the easiest pound I've ever earned. But do you know? And I've been thinking about this over the last couple
safely,
of weeks.
people.
Yeah. The fool and his money and all that. I've been thinking about it over the last couple of weeks, and my reference, playing-wise, goes back to them Bradford, Leeds, Derby's. Brilliant that they were. They had a big pack, they had a mobile pack, they had a couple of crafty halfbacks and some pace and some power on them. There's a lot of similarities between the Bradford of those really heydays for that club and Warrington, and they've got their own awesome foursome at Warrington Wolves, haven't they?
And we were saying that, clearly it's a tough ride at Hull at the moment, but there's a template of what Warrington were last year, what Huddersfield were when Ian Watson arrived.
It's going to be a great game, that Hull FC, Hull KR.
You start with Casford and Wakefield.
Yeah.
Now,
that's going to be a great game as well, isn't it?
No, but it's been built up prematurely as a £1 million game in waiting, isn't it? But it clearly isn't. But should Wakefield lose and be cut adrift and Lee playing as well as they are, it then makes the next 3 quarters of the season difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many different directions for us to go in who talk about it. There's lots of things to get people hooked on the game, whether it's the threat of relegation or the threat of continuing a spiral of poor performances or keeping the momentum of great performances. But whoever put the rugby gods that structured the games together, they're all pretty well matched, aren't they? There isn't one where you think that's a bad team against a good team and vice versa.
In terms of IMG, because I know you're keeping your eye on all of that, they're going to report on Wednesday about grading and the slight revisions to it. Are you a fan in principle of what they're trying to do?
Absolutely, yeah. I've been of the thought process that we need to get outside influence. We're all that busy working in the business, we can't improve the business as a whole. We need to stand back and have a look at what the best thing to do for the actual product. We're arrogant if we think that the game itself is going to sell Super League. The game's always been brilliant. The players will always deliver, but it's not enough for some people. If they're not dyed in the wool, they're not brought into it as kids or stumble on it in the teenage years. What's going to bring them in? It's going to be those outside experience or event type things that will bring them in. So IMG have most people's full support, don't they?
But it's making the game a product, like, you know, and the product sells. So I take it, Cristiano Ronaldo is one person. He has more following on social media than Manchester United and Real Madrid put together, because he's a product. Make a product of the game, get the fans in. You know, you've got to hit the bar differently now. It's not Sky Sports, BBC watching the TV anymore. It's clicks on of the big hits, of the big fights, of the great athletic tries. That's the product now. And the more people that you get watching that, the bigger the game's going to get. The more you include the fans, the academy, the women's, whatever it is you need to do, it becomes a business and an entity, doesn't it, that people want to then commit to, either as a fan or as a sponsor on you know, an endorsement or whatever it is. So an investment, and make it a product, and then it's going to sell.
We need the players to play their part.
Which they always have.
We need the clubs to give that freedom to players. So how many times have we sat down, all of us, and gone, we don't know the players, we don't know the personalities, there's nobody that steps forward and puts the head above the parapet. There's a little bit of the media managers pulling them back, coaches pulling them back, saying sit down, don't make yourself a target. If they were a little bit more forthcoming, we could talk about them in more depth, we could give more layers to that character, and it is about latching on to if you're not, both know I'm not born in Leeds, but consider Leeds my team because of the time that I spent here. I'm not naturally going to come to that conclusion if I'm born in Oldham and don't get any access to anywhere else. The people that know myself, they know Kev, they know Jack now, they now follow Leeds because of the connections that they've got with us. We've got some great players in Oldham that then people who are born in Oldham are following Warrington, or they're following Salford, or they're following whoever it is, Bradford or whoever. They have that connection with that player. The players need to step up. They need to use social media. They need to give the bit of the character away and view themselves as a product.
A classic example.
Yeah.
Jake Connor at Huddersfield. Every team's got.
You know, he was the fans' favourite, wasn't he, when he was here? Because he makes a point of making a bit of respect for himself, marching up and down the side of the pitch, getting the fans engaged. You know, he's as giddy as the fans are sometimes. He's a good product, but again, like you say, you need to do more of that. There needs to be more people like that. Sam Tompkins has made a name being the villain, or whatever it is. You know, whatever he's like off the field. On that field, do you think he's the bad person on that pitch? So there are some characters, but I agree, more of that needs to happen. It's more exciting, isn't it? Pantomime.
In terms of building up rivalry round, you've done your promo for Sky, and a lot of it does have the physical elements from your time.
Do you want me to endorse violence?
No, but what I'm saying is
I'm happy to do it.
It's really interesting where the line is between there has to be some aggression because that's the sport, but we have to now look after the people that play it because of all the surrounding potential litigation with concussion. So you've promoted it with that physical element, but it is something that we're not obviously.
Which answer do you want, Phil? Do you want me? Do you want my answer?
It's passion.
No,
it's passion,
what
right?
do you
It's passion and competitiveness.
You're not here representing anybody. I know that you are a fan of not taking all of the physical intimidatory elements out of the sport, because then it isn't the sport. But it's tough now, isn't it? Because it's a different
It is
world.
tough, but it's not something that we can't get over. My second sport is the UFC and MMA. I love that. Boxing
yes,
to a lesser
the question
extent.
is yes, he loves the bit.
Yeah.
That's going to work
That
well.
was good.
Yeah, boxing to a lesser extent, because I think it's a little bit more pugilism and hit and not get hit. But I like to see somebody get knocked out. I like to see blood and guts all over the canvas. I can't be the only one that likes that. But by the same token, those people that sign up to be MMA fighters, boxers, bare knuckle fighters, I don't see any of them suing the relative governing body. That is the extreme in it. That's the 10 out of 10, and we're somewhere lower down that scale now. somewhere in the middle is the place where we need to live. I'll be honest, if you are suffering with some of the consequences of a professional sport and a life in professional sport, to a certain extent, you know what you're doing. And I know I'm not going to get everybody to agree with me, but that's just my thoughts. My thoughts are my body's smashed to bits now, but I'm not complaining. I loved every single second of it, so we've just got to find the right balance, haven't we?
When's your TV detective series coming out? Because you're obviously in charge of these.
The world's worst
bag.
The most horrific picture known to man.
I was going to say boy band then.
Well,
The world's but
you're the chief.
Fleetwood Mac have come back.
I am
Fleetwood
M.
Mac, yeah. You're showing your age there.
Which one's James Bond of those? I mean, it's got to be Ellery.
Does it?
Or
you never know.
Skullthorpe.
Ellery.
It's not anymore.
Ellery, he's still, I won't give his real age away, but he's over 60. Well, I texted him the other day. The great thing about Ellery is it doesn't matter where I see it. Comes up to me, shakes my hand, gives me an embrace, and I still finish that embrace and look round to say, that's Ellery.
Yeah.
Me and him are like that. He's still got that ability. He's what?
That's what I do with you.
I know. Well,
This is my pal.
yeah.
This is my pal, everybody.
You need to get out of it.
Well, maybe you do too then.
Yeah, she knows all the famous people on the telly now.
I didn't like him.
Adam Hill, Alan Skelton, Sam Tompkins.
You get invited to restaurant launches in London with fashionable
Yeah, but I'm
quarters.
sat next to
Kyle
Barrie
Amor,
McDermott.
Mark Wilson. They're all those
That's
famous.
his baz, aren't I? The reason I started playing rugby.
Well, I mean, he's our favourite out of Baz
The
and Tess.
reason I ran away from my first fight.
That's not much of a
Well,
bar, is
no,
it?
because after the Women's Grand Final last year, I said to Terry O'Connor, come on the podcast. And he said, oh, I don't do podcasts. A week later, he's on a podcast. So he's a liar.
He's a
Put
liar.
that out there.
Got it on there.
He is a liar.
He said he was signed for Wakefield if Andy Kelly had stayed as coach as well in 2001, but I don't
That's
believe
a lie.
that either. Yeah.
And
No
that's
one
a
was
lie.
signed for Wakefield. Sure.
I could fill your podcast with just slaughtering Tez, but nobody wants to listen to that. Jared doing well, by the way.
Yes. Yeah. Really
Incredible again at weekend.
58 tackles.
Unbelievable. And he got his
80 minutes.
first 80 minutes, which was something that was important to him, but important to the team because with the loss of Cruz leaving now, Rowan Smith doesn't have to cover him on the bench with a fear of him blowing up.
Although he has got Corey Johnson if he needs him, who looks like he could be a tackle.
Yeah. Rob Burrow used to always talk about Corey Johnson, and when he left and sort of got disillusioned for a spell, Rob thought it was a great shame. So,
Well, Rob's recommended him, that's good enough for the rest.
yeah.
Prop forwards, what do they make of short kickoffs? Fans, not fans?
I don't have to worry about them, so when
Well, no,
I'm
but
back on that
if you were playing, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but
Baz isn't going to face one now either.
yeah, but then you face whoever's in front of it gets it first, don't you? If I'm on the second phase, that's fine. It's tactical, isn't it?
How do you feel about it when they're kicking, it goes to them anyway, and you've given up 30 metres of territory?
Well, then, whoever's on our front line should have got to it first.
But if they don't,
What if that's you, though?
Quicker then, shouldn't they?
but what if they don't? What do you feel about the consequence of a short kick off?
Well, I've got to run them forward a little bit, but then
Did you nearly drop the F-bomb then?
no, I
Nearly
did not.
swore then.
Never. I would run up and then I'd be like, oh bloody hell, this is a bit hard extra work for me. Then I'd smash them back. Then what I do is I make a really big tackle, so I push them back 10 metres anyway.
Kick it longer.
I like the trick shots. I do. I'm interested in the evolution of this team on what we saw over the last 2 weeks is a team that can play on a dry pitch, passes sticking, trick shots working, unbelievable entertainment to watch, as opposed to wet, windy, greasy ball where nothing went. I wouldn't for a gold pig have been Luke Hooley or Darrell Alfords at weekend. No.
To be fair, like that weather was a lot worse in person than it looked on TV.
When you were in hospitality work?
Pardon?
You were in hospitality work?
I was, yes.
You did come to the grandstand.
I came and sat with the normal people.
I wouldn't say
We
that.
were,
I wouldn't
we
say
were
you
tw-
were the
we
normal
were 20
people.
metres underneath the stand and it was still sideways rain. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
just Hull.
It was horrendous. No, I've been to Hull KR many a time and had a good time there. Apart from that day when it was a Challenge Cup against Castleford, it was a 90-minute game, a 98-minute game, and it was Baltic. And I was up in the gantry, and it sways, that gantry. It's the worst gantry in the world.
It moves when everyone claps.
Yeah.
You like that.
I had a fear of heights. It was one of my first commentating games. It was a 98-minute game, and it was freezing cold. I could have shed a few tears if I wasn't so frozen.
Yeah, but at least you're getting paid. I assume.
No, I'd do it for fun.
Would you?
Nobody said that.
Yes,
No.
delete.
I mean, the first thing that strikes me now is, in this world of podcasting, why haven't you two got a podcast today? That'd be a great idea. Just get on to...
I listen to a lot of them. I listen to this every week. I do... I've got a dog, and I've always walked dogs, and I've always gone out and walked and ran. I'm training for the Roughborough Marathon, so I'm listening to at least one podcast a day. So I don't know why I've never bothered with a podcast, other than I'd probably get myself sacked.
I'll have to be past the 9 o'clock watershed-esque type of podcast. There are lots
I swear
of
on the
podcasts.
Super League once.
And also, we don't want to water down the market. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you guys are all doing really well. If we did, we'd take it.
That's a butter.
Do you know what I'm
Butter in
saying?
it. Butter.
So basically, we're doing you guys a favour, aren't we? Also, we said.
Who's going to win the Women's Super League? I mean, I know what you're going to say, but...
No, you don't. I'm going to say York or Leeds, actually.
That's,
I think
that's
they're
the
the
right
big two.
answer.
I think they're the big two. Saints can do it. They've got through the academy girls. I think there's a bit of a restructure going on there in terms of the coaching, their players. Leeds have signed really well. York have signed really well. What both clubs are doing in terms of making the women elite athletes is very good. I'll not focus on the payment thing because I've got my thoughts on it. It's great that we've got a bit of payment, but it's not, please, it's not full-time employment. These girls are not professionals. It is a winning bonus of a nominal amount which might pay for a bit of petrol, but it's in the right direction, and that's what we need. I don't want to take anything away from the fact they're getting paid, but I don't want people to think these girls are now professional, because they're not. But I think what both clubs are doing, I think what Clint Goodchild's doing at York is just phenomenal. He was here at the women's launch on Tuesday, but he's walking around, he's speaking to his players like he's calling Kelsey and Sinead the bosses. It's like, hi boss, how's it going? Like, his respect for the women's game is phenomenal and what he wants to do, but he's business-minded. He knows that the women's game is a business and it can be, so he's invested in it. Much like here at Leeds, I've always been the front runners of the women's game and pushing the women, so it's between the two, and I think all three, well, the Challenge Cup final and the Grand Final will be between those two, and it'll be down to the wire who gets to lift the league leaders.
I think it's one of the most exciting parts of the game, the women's game at the minute, because we always talk about increasing the bottom of the pyramid for participation and for spectators, but everybody who I meet, the lovely girls, but much like any rugby lad, you know, you've had Steve Pitchford on here before. We've sat down, all lovely lads. You get over that white line, and that's it. The murderers and serial killers, aren't they? Which is part of the Jekyll and Hyde attraction of playing rugby. You can be who you want on there, but I'm delighted to see that we'll give young girls aspirations, somewhere to go. We've always been inclusive in rugby league. I don't care what anybody says, and I know there's been sticky patches with different, you know, the 70s and the 80s, and I've listened to some of the things that players of colour have had to go through. We've worked our way through that, but I think we've always been inclusive because we can't afford not to bring everybody in.
Well, the love of the game is greater than any discrimination or anything like that. So if you want to play our game,
we're miles. I'm sorry. We're right behind it with Sky. We're broadcasting quite a lot of games, including the first one this Sunday. I'm on the international game. I'm doing the comps for the international game in a couple of weeks. So I'll do my research and look at and canvas some help from Danika, who helped me on the last women's game. But I think what we've got to do is embrace, encourage, and anybody that's got that mindset of it's a man's game, he's going to get left behind, and it's unfortunate, but that's what we've got to do to move forward.
You know, that was the strapline of rugby league in the early 80s, a man's game for all the family.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it is, but if you think of the theory of a man's game and the meaning of a man's game, back then it's for men.
Yeah.
What it means now is you've got to be at a certain mindset. haven't you?
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I've got to do
Another break and
Just
play.
doing this podcast now. With the 2 minutes.
All right, no, I asked you.
Arguably, the game of the weekend was the wheelchair game between Wigan and Leeds.
Well, that was crucial, wasn't it? Because Wigan, beat Halifax, who obviously are top of the chain there. So I thought it was going to be a really important game to see where Leeds were and talking about wheelchair. And
Saying arguably the game of the weekend was Wigan and Leeds wheelchair.
But that was it. It was important. Yeah, but it was important as well. The fact that Wigan made such a statement against Halifax the week before, Leeds had to lay down a marker, and I'm not saying they only just did it, but it was really quite tight. Which, again, similarly to the women's game, instead of having a couple of front runners, you've now got the game again. The platform is, it's bigger. People playing it is a lot bigger thanks to the World Cup, which has been the biggest catalyst for. I'd love to see the figures on people taking up wheelchair this season, but that makes it even better spectacle. Again, another product for Rugby League that's really exciting, and I think that was the best result. Had it been a runaway score for Leeds, then not so much, but I'm really glad that there's more teams that are going to compete for the trophies this season there as well.
I'm not sure they believe it. When we were at the wheelchair awards a month or so back, when I was speaking to a couple of players, and the coach was saying, generally watching at home, it's one of the best things I've ever seen, the World Cup final. I think they believe, not that I'm being disingenuous, but that they can have that.
No, I loved watching it on TV, and then one of my first live games was commentating, and I spent the whole time going, because the noises are ridiculous, like the actual physicality of it. I know it's
hilarious watching people sing for the first time. Absolutely.
But I had to commentate, and it was like different, and it was at the Copper Box. I had the occasion, I had the stadium, I had the echo and the noise. So
Are you doing all right?
Yeah, it was fantastic. All right.
Right, JP, you're in now.
Joining the podcast. Yeah,
You're in.
now.
Have you got a podcast?
Bringing in the big guns going.
All right, okay. Who's podcast? Danika, do you want a drink? I'll have a podcast. Anybody want a drink?
No, we're fine.
week, get on this
We'll
type
be
of
stopping
podcast.
in a minute anyway,
Because
you'll be doing your
they're going to play this song.
If you wanted to come on, you're more than welcome.
Right, all right, yeah.
There's no format.
Okay.
We're honoured to have you. How are you?
I'm all right, yeah. Yourself?
Well, I'm feeling incredibly old because your son signed for his first professional contract.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. He's managed to get in there part-time and do a bit.
How does that make you feel towards tonight?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a long way to go. He's been working hard, so he understands that, it's a part-time contract, and that is what it is at the moment, but he's done well to get this far. In the last 5 or 6 years, and he's worked very hard on his physicality, his size and his game over the last 2 or 3 years, and he just needs to keep doing that.
In terms of your association with the game at the moment, you're doing a lot of commercial stuff behind the scenes, you still get links to the sport. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I mean, I think my link to the game becomes smaller and smaller over time, but I still do a bit with Leeds. In commercial on game day, I love working with the BBC as well. It's an amazing job, so I'm very lucky to be part of that. And just enjoying, watching the games this year. I'm just thinking on my drive down here that we have issues in the game, but we've got a good product at the moment on the pitch. I think, I think about all the wrestling stuff we've had to go through and those kind of things. I think the product we've got on the pitch at the moment is really good and enjoyable to watch.
We were talking to Barry about the physical side of it as well and how that's now being tempered with some potential litigation. Do you think we're in the right place? Do you think we're worrying too much about the fact that players play because they want to play? And they know the dangers?
Look, I think we know the dangers. I just think sometimes you need to be safe on yourself a little bit. And save the players from themselves by putting the right protocols in around return back to playing after suffering a concussion. And also, I'm just a big believer that they've got to get on top of collisions in training, like the NFL have done. I think that's as much to blame, in my opinion, around long-term damage to the brain. And I just think, we can still have the right protocols in place and not sanitise the games too much. And I think we can admire people's athleticism and bravery and still
We just need the right protocol. I think we're heading in that direction.
Did you play when you knew you shouldn't have done?
Well, I don't think we knew so much then. 20 years ago, concussion was related to, could be related to early onset dementia, but yeah, there's plenty of games you play when you get buzzed or you get slightly concussed or knocked out when you get on and play on again. That was just part of it. But fortunately, that's changed for the players going forward.
Nights like tonight where you're extolling the prop forwards are, and you've got Steve Pitchford from the 70s, you've got Barry, yourself, and now Danika. There'll be some stories tonight, I imagine.
Yeah, it should be good fun. Four very different players in that particular position, so it should be good. There should be some good stories on tonight, and I'm looking forward to listening to hearing those three. Got to say that.
The ultra challenges that you've done a couple of double marathons, running around London and all that kind of thing. Is that as much that you need to keep that competitive edge for you personally, as well as the money that you've clearly raised?
I think maybe when I first finished playing, that may have been the case. You needed that physical challenge on the weekend at the end of the week, but I'm over that now, and I like doing it. I like running just for running's sake. I'm keeping myself healthy, and I like being involved in raising money for charity. I think, I don't particularly want to be famous. Through Rugby League, I think you have attained some level of celebrity, but I think it's about using it in the right way, and I think that's a good way to do it. To raise money for charity.
Jamie, can you just sign Rob's golf shirt?
Well, they're going to kick us off in a minute, aren't they?
All right, pleasure. No worries. Yeah.
We need to mention Dewsbury because they've been with us in the Challenge Cup. I don't think we mentioned Wigan and Leeds, but
I think you're probably on the table to near the stage, and we'll just round up the weekend for you.
Right, all right. We'll go with it. Nice to see you.
Yeah, Wigan beat Leeds. Did we mention that? Everything happened so long ago now. I'm back. Hello. I was here all the time, honest. I didn't go off. Dewsbury beating Widnes, that was quite good.
That is the result of the weekend.
By far. And never looked uncomfortable in that game. It wasn't they've nicked it in the death kind of thing. They were always in that match, which was good. They've announced the European Championship fixtures. That's also good.
Not the venues yet, or the actual dates, because there's still a bit of work to do with perhaps doing men's and women's fixtures on the same day. But yeah, the weekends that they're being played all announced, which is great.
I don't think there was anything else in the cup to mention really. Rochdale Mayfield put up a good fight against Newcastle Thunder. York beating Sheffield Eagles in a very game of two halves. Probably helped by Danny Kerman handicapping by getting sent off in the first half, having scored a couple of tries. But
Doncaster played very well in the first half at London, but London then ran away with it. But it's getting interesting now because we're into the penultimate round before we know the 1895 semi-finalists. So there's some tasty round 5 fixtures with more riding on it than just the Challenge Cup.
Wembley is approaching. We won't be here next Monday because it's Easter Monday, and I'm working. It's time and a half,
and we'll be lying down after all the rugby we'll be watching.
Exactly. So, from Headingley, we'll be back at some point in the next week. There will be a special Women's Super League preview podcast coming out in a couple of days. I'm hoping you can hear the end of this over this wonderful track, which I think we've heard 4 times. This must be the new one from the Kaiser team. But from a bustling Headingley, thanks for watching. Magazine out next week.
It'll be towards the end of next week.
Thanks for all your comments, especially Kevin and Mark discussing whether St. Saul Warrington it will be their year this year. I've lost the will to speak, not the will, the ability. I'm going to end the stream. Good night, goodbye, thank you.